Joining us now, Caroline Polisi and David Bruno, defense attorney extraordinaires. But for these purposes, one's prosecuting, one's defending. So let's talk about this confession. And I will go to you, David. Okay. We have an issue where the mom has confessed. The defense obviously wants a confession tossed. Caroline Polisi believes it should be tossed. Your view is it should not be. Why?
Well, the defense has a couple problems. First, procedurally. Okay, because this hearing has already taken place. In fact, this judge heard testimony 2 days where these issues were not brought up by the defense. And the judge made a ruling and found that the statements were voluntary and admissible. So first of all, they're late to the party, and they're asking for the judge to reconsider.
Okay, so the judge reconsiders, and he says, you know what, I think I was wrong the first time. Why is he not wrong the first time?
Well, he's not wrong because even if this individual had some mental deficiencies, it's not dispositive of this issue. It goes to the totality of the circumstances. And what the problem is with the expert report in and of itself is that it relies on the defendant who has self-serving reasons to give these stories. And in fact, these are late disclosures. She did not previously tell anyone about these problems and this trauma until it was after the judge's ruling.
So she has self-interest here. So
sure.
Caroline,
facing
what about
murder
that?
charges.
What about that?
Well, you're right that the analysis that the court is going to engage in here is a totality of the circumstances.
Consider everything.
So considering everything, everything points to this confession should be tossed. It should not be seeing the light of day in that courtroom. This woman was uniquely susceptible to police coercive interrogation techniques, given her vast history of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. When you combine that with the fact that this was a 9-hour interrogation directly after the death of her child, everything points to this not being a voluntary confession.
Here's my problem, Caroline. The problem is that you have a waiver, right, where police say you have a right to remain silent, and you do if you want to. You can remain silent. She says no. You have a right. Anything you say will be used against you. She says okay. She otherwise then agrees. She gives them information, which we know to be credible, about what she did. And she says she covers the faces and everything else. They offer her food. They offer her a break. They offer her everything. She seems to be talking voluntarily. So why now, David, based upon that, should there be an argument that, oh, it's 9 hours, it's too long, it should be thrown out?
Sure, there could be an argument, but we're in this technology age where, fortunately for the prosecutor, there's a video of this. And yes, she's cool, calm, collected, and she makes perfect sense in the statements itself. She talks about the suffocation and also the motive, which I think is huge because that makes perfect sense. She says why she killed these individuals. She was jealous that the daughter wasn't getting enough attention from the father, and various other reasons.
That's beside the point.
So, no, it's credible. It's important.
Let's take a look at this. Now, we have a confession of her killing Gavin. Just show that momentarily, right? All right. So mom's confession. Brittany also admitted that killing Gavin was the hardest as he struggled while she suffocated him. She stated, going on, that she had to hold his legs down while killing him and that it took a few minutes. This seems to me, Caroline, that she knows exactly what she's talking about. She doesn't seem coerced. She seems that she's being candid and explaining exactly what she did. So why should we give her the benefit, a killer who killed 3 kids over the course of 13 months, by saying she has trauma? You know, they mistreated her. It was too coercive. It was 9 hours. Let's throw this out.
Joey, I don't care what she said in that confession. The fact is her cognitive and executive functioning were way below average. There's a neuropsychologist here that submitted this new testimony here. You know, this should not see the light of day in the courtroom. There's no reason for this to come in.
And by the way, talking about light of day, we have the neuropsychologist, or not the, but certainly a very good one, and that's the clinical neuropsychologist you see there. And Jenna Kravitz, just weigh in on that issue. Do you think ultimately that there is, I know you said before it's possible, but do you think that there's a firm legal basis? Because I know one thing, and that's the prosecution is going to get their own experts to say something contrary to what the defense experts say.
Absolutely. And obviously, I'm not an attorney and I'm not a legal expert, but the data is objective. These are psychometrically valid and reliable measures that we use. And so, you know, and on top of that, this was a very well-known neuropsychologist who's credible, who did this evaluation, and the findings, you know, reflect the objective data here.
Jenna, we appreciate that. And we should just say one thing as us attorneys speaking about this, that we're only speaking about a confession. And I don't want to say only because it's significant. She could still be prosecuted absent the confession. So even if the confession is suppressed, they would just need other information in order to move forward.
But very difficult case for the state if this confession does not come in.
Absolutely.
Because on the first two murders, ME said that the cause and manner were undetermined.
Aha. So, to be continued. A lot more on that. Coming up, have to bring in the attorneys, Caroline Polisi, of course, and David Bruno. Let's talk about this. What are the defenses here, Caroline? You're defense attorney extraordinaire. Take us through this.
As Jenna teed it up so nicely, I would not rule out a self-defense defense in this situation, which, by the way, is a complete defense to a charge of murder. Now, it seems like he had superficial wounds, but you know, we're hearing that they were self-inflicted. I think these wounds could have been perhaps from a domestic violence situation prior to the death of the mother. Now, another thing we're going to want to look into for mitigating factors here, of course, is the mental illness, a history of mental illness that this boy has. And certainly, if he is convicted of this crime, that will go to a mitigating factor in sentencing.
Caroline. But before doing that, to your point about self-defense, though, I mean, David, self-defense, I'm really concerned and I'm really frightened of my 56-year-old mom, so I need to take a hammer and bludgeon her to death. So is that a type of defense you think that would stand up in your court?
Absolutely not. No, and there's more to it also. So this is a self-defense case, but I'm going to take pictures of the crime scene and text it to friends, or I'm going to write a letter, which was also found, that described how he killed her. I mean, that's a great leap, and I respectfully disagree with the ladies again. Okay, this is a clear-cut murder case. There is a murder weapon that is hidden in the defendant's bedroom. There is a letter that describes the murder itself, and there is a text message that's sent to a friend that shows the body and the gruesome crime scene. I'll take it.
But to Caroline's point, you know, I just want to play, we have a sound here of a major, that's Hartford County Sheriff's major. And let's listen to this, and then let's talk about that, the mitigation.
The house has a history of drug abuse, mental illness, and also domestic issues.
They don't come out of the house, and if they do, they're usually screaming at each other.
So, Caroline, I somewhat was belittling your point about the mother who's dangerous at 56 years old, but certainly you as a defense attorney, I certainly would as well. If there's a history of that abuse, you could certainly make the argument that there may have been some fear by him that something was going on.
Absolutely. For all we know, he may have tried to escape. He may have tried to run away from her before, and, you know, he was punished for that. We don't know what's been going on behind closed doors. There are a lot of unanswered questions here, and this certainly is not a slam-dunk case.
But here's my issue with that, David, and my issue is this. There's a point where you have to defend yourself, and we all know that you could exceed the limits of self-defense because you act excessively, and that's my issue here. He takes a hammer to the point where he bludgeons her to death. So does he really need to take it that far? When does it become murder?
Sure, that's an issue, whether or not he exceeded what was legally sufficient for a defense. But I don't see it right now. And I think we absolutely need to hear more, because based on what has been reported, even if there was some sort of abuse or domestic issues, that could go both ways. That could also go to a motive. And that's a great reason to kill someone, because you have such animosity and hatred towards an individual.
Now, that's a good point. So it's not so much you're defending yourself, it's that you don't like them, and so therefore you're going to take something out on them. And I want to bring in the neuropsychologist on this point, too. I think we still have Jenna Kravitz with us. And just in setting it up, I mean, certainly the defense may go the whole mitigation route. You heard Caroline Polisi speaking of that issue. You know, there's a history of family violence and abuse. How much of that do you think we could talk about in terms of the child's mental capacity, how it may have impaired his mental capacity, how he may have reached a boiling point? Any of that you could work up as an expert that could be used in court?
Well, you know, this is an adolescent, so adolescent brains are not fully developed anyway. And adolescence is kind of like a tumultuous time, you know, aside from everything. So, you know, what you have here is an adolescent who doesn't have a fully developed brain with not perfect problem-solving, you know, abilities, who felt like, and I really believe this, out of desperation, this was the only way he could change his life. I mean, it sounds like this was a really unsafe environment. And throughout the course of the years, depending on what kind of abuse, the level of abuse that he suffered, sure, there probably, you know, there could be, I should say, some level of cognitive dysfunction.
I would imagine.
Yeah,
Sure.
but sorry to cut you off. This is not, you know, this is not a case of like the Menendez brothers who killed for money, or this doesn't seem to be a case of a mean teenager. We haven't heard any reports like that. This seems to be a teenager who was really desperate and felt unsafe in his own home.
Yeah, needless to say. Do we still have Dave Priest with us? So I'll ask you then.
I want to make a point.
Please.
First of all, this is a 16-year-old. And the prosecutor's office knows the most information to date. And they made one decision so far, and that is to treat this individual like an adult. Okay, so that's an important decision. If the prosecutor's office, knowing the facts and the circumstances of the murder, thought that there may be some defenses, they may have kept it down in juvenile court and treated this individual as a juvenile.
My only issue with that, David, is that a lot of times, and this disturbs me, prosecutors act based upon the political, necessity. The community wants, oh my goodness, this is so horrible, so we have to charge as an adult instead of a factual issue. But more to come, all right? Indeed. Now, Caroline Polisi, of course, David Bruno, quick reactions, to this. You want a baby safe. That's why you have these laws.
Yeah, and this is exactly why, Joey, we see more and more states enacting these safe haven laws. We want parents to know that there are options because the alternative is much, much worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this story hits home for me. I have a 5-week-old home.
God bless you,
and the fact is, I think this show does need to be about education. Just look back to the first 2 blocks that we had, where a mother was charged with killing 3 children. So education's important, and sad story, but hopefully this baby finds a nice home.
It's a great story, though. At the end of the day, look at that precious girl. She's okay, right? Could be worse. All right. Now, this Sunday...